Good day, grade 8s. Welcome to this class. This is your second lesson of this term. I hope that you are up to date with lesson 1. If you're not, please go recap the video or follow the presentation or PDF version thereof and make sure you understand the work. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me now via WhatsApp, or you can send me an email at paul@gla-jbay.org. Okay, so today we're going to continue with entrepreneurship factors of production, and we're going to focus on one of the 4 factors of production, which is labor. Now, you know that the business needs all 4 factors of production to function well. You need capital invested, you need the natural resources of which you make your product with, you need entrepreneurship, that's being able to take risks, and labor, that is the physical part of doing the work. Like you have to do your EMS work right now. So let's look at some keywords that you need to be able to do or define after this class. You need to define unskilled labor. What is that? Define half-skilled labor, skilled work, highly skilled labor, and you have to define gross domestic product, or abbreviated as GDP. Okay, so write down each key term and give a brief definition of each. Do this in your script right now, and take some time now, 2 minutes, pause this video, complete it, and then you can continue with the video. Okay, so we're going to start with the role of workers in a business venture. So, like I said, the first factor of production that's relating to workers, we call that labor. So workers are appointed to produce products and to render services. So you're employed. So let's say I own a business and I employ 500 people. Now let's take Volkswagen as an example. Volkswagen employs 500 people in this scenario that I'm creating, and they produce toy cars. It's Volkswagen Toy Cars is the company. They produce toy cars, and that your function as a laborer is to help manufacture cars. Okay, so there's a press that presses out the car bodies, and then there's a plastic assembly that where the wheels are made, and then your job as a worker is to assemble the different parts to create the final product, and then to put it on a conveyor belt where it will then be packaged in another machine. Okay, so each business or each person in that business will contribute to the GDP of an economy. So your GDP means it's a measurement of what happens in the economy of a country, your gross domestic product. So it's all the products that's produced within the borders of South Africa within 1 year. So it's everything that's produced in 1 year in South Africa. That's your GDP. So that measures of how the economy looks like. It's almost like if you think of how hot is it outside now, you will check your thermometer or a thermometer on your cell phone or a weather app, and that will tell you how it is. So that's a good way of looking at the measurement of what happens in the economy. So another part of the role of workers is they have to pay the government tax. So the government needs to have tax as a form of income, as we did in the previous term, and they need to assist businesses or help workers, all the individuals with certain services and products as well, but we did that last term. So another part of a worker's role is they need to be able to provide for themselves, okay, and for their families. If you can't provide, then you are dependent on governments for a grant, a social grant, and that puts pressure on the economy, puts pressure on the government, because that's income that they should not, or that they can use for something else, for example. And it's also another thing that they are actually counting on everyone to work, so that everyone can pay tax. That would be in an ideal economy, that everyone works, everyone's got a job, everyone pays tax, and the government can render their services accordingly. But that doesn't happen, so there's a lot of social grants that help alleviate the pressure. Okay, it's not social burden, it's social grant. Okay, so some duties to work. When you're a worker and I employ you to build these cars, I expect of you to do that, to work to make that's in this legal boundary that I've created. Should not be absent without reason, punctual, so be on time. You don't leave the workplace without permission. You're not drunk or not sleeping on duty. You're not under the influence of illegal substances. You won't participate in illegal strikes or cause harm or damage to any other worker or properties in the workplace. Okay, what is acceptable? You should have proper manners, treat everyone with respect, don't insult your fellow workers, don't fight, be honest, build a team, and be loyal, and do not reveal trade secrets. If you would then, for example, reveal my trade secret of how we make them, the toy cars, and that would give a competitor an unfair advantage. And that's my intellectual property, or Volkswagen toy cars intellectual property, um, which you then hand over, and that is technically, well, not technically, it would be classified as piracy, as you've let loose of a secret and someone else uses it for um, without permission, or by contravening the Patent or Copyright Act. So, labor. We get four types of labor. You get unskilled labor, which is formal. It's workers with no formal training, but they've got experience. It's routine work. Each day the same. It's physical work, and that's like a gardener or a farm worker. Then you get half-skilled labor. They've got basic writing and numeracy skills. They've got short periods of training. They do routine work, but they've got no management skills. That's like your production workers or a cashier. Then your skilled workers got a minimum of grade 9, or some sort of training, for example, a trade like electrician or a plumber or a hairdresser. They must be able to make decisions and manage some staff, because sometimes mostly they'll have their own businesses and they need to be able to do that. Then you get your highly skilled workers. Now they have the years of education, normally in a tertiary education, and sometimes even postgraduate qualifications. They are experts in their fields and they will fulfill a management role or a function. So that's like your doctors, teachers, scientists, etc. Okay, looking at fair employment. Now this is where the government intervenes. They will influence and they regulate industrial relations. Now this is a term that you need to understand, industrial relations. So they will regulate this and fair employment practices. How will they regulate and influence fair employment practice and industrial relations? They will implement laws, rules, and agreements, and that which is upheld in the courts of law. So we know from term 1 that there's different courts, but every court, these laws, rules, and agreements will be upheld. So what do we mean with industrial relations? This is the relationship that exists between employers and employees, as well as employers and trade unions. So the government established this act, the Labour Relations Act, LRA number 66 of 1995. And they wanted to achieve the following. They wanted to provide a basic legal framework for these relationships in South Africa. That means in any relationship there must be boundaries. When you fight, a fight must be fair, so the playing field must be fair. People should not be people should have access, and it should be legal, and it should be fair. So I should have fair opportunities, and not be hindered in that sense. Okay, so IR, as I said earlier, it's the employment relationship between employees and their employer, where employers expect their workers to work productively, and the employees to expect to receive a salary in return. Your IR is also, like I said, the relationship between trade unions and employers, and the government wanted to promote economic development, labor peace, democracy in the workplace, and social justice with this act. If we look at the difference, the employee rights, so the business have got the following. So the government intervenes, they gave this legal framework, say this is what you're allowed to do, this is what you're not allowed to do. You can't fight, you can't just fire someone. You have it's unfair to discriminate against them, but this is the what the business can do. They must ensure the following practices. So people have workers got 6 basic rights. The right to work. Okay, so that's the democratic right to work. Okay, and the worker needs to do it willingly and be paid for it fairly. Okay, so you can't work and then not receive a just remuneration. What I'm also saying is if you work as a dishwasher, you can't expect the salary of the business owner. Okay, each work will get its own remuneration. The right to collective negotiations, that means you don't necessarily just negotiate one-on-one, but the group people. It's like that's now where a trade union comes into play. They are the workers are united and then represented by someone which will then negotiate on their behalf. Okay, right to protection. So workers will have the right to satisfactory remuneration and working conditions, and the protection of health and safety and security and protection against unfair labor practices. So it's not just it's a physical protection in the working conditions. It's a protection of their wages, remuneration, and it's a protection of their health, safety, and unfair labor practices. Next is you've got the right to training, where a business should assist in training their employees to upskill them. This is not always business are not always able to do that, as training costs a lot of money, but businesses will draw a lot of advantages from this should they train their employees. If they upskill them, then the workers can deliver a better quality product, which means that more people will want to buy a product or continue to buy the product. If it's a lower quality product, then less people will buy it, and eventually the business will not be able to produce it anymore. Okay, right to strike. So workers will have a right to strike if they feel they've been treated unfairly, but this must be a legal strike. That means they have to give a notice of at least 48 hours, before they commence on the strike. Right to freedom of association. That means they can choose to belong to any trade union which will represent them and negotiate on their behalf. And what do they negotiate? Fair employment packages and remuneration. So labor laws. If we look at the labor laws, another one is the basic conditions of employment. Now this act is incredible. It started out or it was implemented in 1997, and it has a very important and a positive impact. So this act says exactly what is the minimum requirements that a company or a business should have as a standard employment contract for its workers. So let's say in this case against Volkswagen toy cars, if they employ you as an artisan or as a production person or assembler, then the basic minimum of your job will be that you will work 8 to 5 or not more than 8 or 9 hours a day, but not more than 45 hours a week. So they can mix that up. You're not allowed to work more than 12 hours overtime in a specific period of time. There should be rest days, the rest periods. Your remuneration should be fair, leave should be specified. So they specify all the things in a contract. That is the bare minimum. Okay, and this is to protect vulnerable workers, to improve their working conditions, and to address issues such as child labor, discrimination, and unfair employment practices. So part of that is you have to be a minimum age. Okay, so child labor is in the case of many foreign countries where they use kids to work in factories to produce, for example, clothing. Discrimination is still a big issue in South Africa, and they wanted to address that topic with this legislation. and other unemployment practices. So they forced people to work long hours without paying them or giving them a break. So here's a few things that we can look at. Your working hours. So there's a maximum of 45 hours a week. As I said, there must be a lunch break with an hour after 5 hours. Public holidays. That means if you should work on that, you must be paid double the normal rate. Normal leave is 21 days for each year that you've worked, and that should be 21 consecutive days, which means it's technically 21 days. So it would be from Monday to Sunday is 7, so 3 weeks of that. Okay, then if you add that up, it's actually just 15 leave days from, if you look at the working schedule. So it's 15 work days or 21 weekdays. That's consecutive. Okay, maternity leave, you'll get 4 months unpaid salary. You can take 4 months and not being paid in that period. Family responsibility, you've got 3 days a year. Overtime, you have a maximum of 10 hours a week or 3 hours a day by mutual agreement, and that's normally by 1.5 times of a norm of equal paid. Sick leave, you are allowed 30 days every 3 years, and if they work a 5-day week or 36 days in a 3-year period if they work 6 days a week. Termination of employment. So if the contract should come to an end, what is the notice period? It can be from 1 week to 4 weeks, depending on the period that you've been working for the company. 1 week if you've been working for the company for less than a month, 2 weeks if you've worked for less than a year, and 4 weeks if you've worked for more than a year. Okay. Lastly, Employment Equity Act. This aim is to achieve equity in the workplace by preventing unfair discrimination and affirmative action measures. And that means you can apply only a specific person with of a specific race. And normally the order would be African, colored, and Indian people. And they would start with women and then men. So it's black woman, black men, colored woman, colored men, Indian woman, Indian men, disabilities, and then you would get the white woman and white men. That is the affirmative action measures. And that's part of the employment equity. This act was initially created to make sure that everyone is equal in the workplace. The workplace was not an equal place. People just hired family and friends and kept it in the family, and big businesses was not there was no equal representation. So for example, in a town like Jeffries, if they opened a business, then if you look at equal representation, there was just white people working in the company, but it didn't represent the population or of that specific area. So this act aims to redress that and say, listen, everyone should have an equal opportunity. But companies didn't follow it, and then they said, okay, now we'll force you. You'll have to have people from specific races or backgrounds in your company, but that's dependent on the demographics or the people that lives in that area. Okay. So this is it. That's the work that you should be able to do. So define your key terms, describe the different types of workers, define the GDP, what is a social grant. Please copy the table on page 88 and draw figure 2.10 in your workbook. Okay, thank you. Have a good day.